Marjanovski, the director of the Clinic for Traumatology, Orthopedic Diseases, Anesthesia, Reanimation, and Intensive Treatment. Panchet Toshkovsky, Minister of Interior. Vlada Misailovsky, Minister of Defense. And Valentina Atanasovska, Manager of the International Cooperation Department at the Rescue and Protection Agency. Good day. Welcome to this conference and the first panel on the European mechanism and international response, dedicated more on the solidarity. I'm Sasha Klekowski. I will be moderating this panel, and it's worth noting that I was a member of the crisis group that coped with this huge tragedy. My highly esteemed panelists were already introduced, and we have them here with us. We are here in Skopje today. Skopje is known as the city of solidarity, as it was struck by the biggest disaster in the history of modern Macedonia, the 1963 earthquake. We are here to mark it and express our gratitude to all of you for helping in the second largest tragedy that has hit North Macedonia, and that is the Kočani fire. We will be talking today about solidarity that was clearly demonstrated at even the lowest level in the community through provision of urgent first aid that involved tens and tens of teams, replacement teams of the physicians, the admission to the hospitals in Skopje and Stipen and the Mother Teresa Clinical Center and the Bajibenes system, the solidarity of the pharmacies that opened up their warehouses to provide the required and necessary medicines, and of course the solidarity demonstrated by the international community, primarily by our neighbors. Bulgaria, Greece, Turkey, and Serbia were among the first countries to volunteer to help, and of course solidarity at the European level. In addition to solidarity, we will also be talking about coordination as someone who has had personal experience in the work of this European mechanism. I must say I was somewhat surprised, but interinstitutional cooperation, we are sometimes known for lacking coordination, but this time we had an exceptionally good cooperation both with the Ministry of Defense and the Internal Affairs and many other state institutions. This helped us to take care of more than 200 injured initially at the Macedonian hospitals, and then in 34 hospitals in 14 countries that hosted and treated 115 victims. Great gratitude to all of these hospitals, and the countries that I mentioned are only those that helped in this way. Let me start this conversation with Minister Panchet Toshkovsky, the Minister of Internal Affairs. Mr. Minister, less than a month before the Kočani tragedy in February, of last year, there was this civil protection activity that involved many participants, and that was mentioned by many participants in the rescue exercises in the Kochani. And that was a civil protection action. Can you tell us something more about that and the involvement of your ministry in coping with this tragedy? Thank you. First of all, let me express my deep condolences with each of the families that lost someone close a year ago. Let me also express my deep respect for the families of the victims, and may God help them to cope with all the challenges that they are facing. I also would like to express my huge gratitude to both our neighbors and all other friendly countries that were quick to help us in this terrible tragedy that took place. And I believe it is their solidarity and readiness to help was one of these key things that helped us provide the most suitable response to this tragedy. And of course, huge gratitude goes also to all those involved in the field on the day of the tragedy and those that followed, especially the physicians, nurses, paramedics, drivers of ambulances, police officers, members of the Ministry of Defense, and all of those that took part in providing the help necessary so that we can save as many lives as possible.
On the 1st of February 2025, the Ministry of Interior, together with the Ministry of Health and the Red Cross, together with the firefighting unit of the city of Skopje, participated in a simulation where the event was an improvised event at the junction of Kadino in Skopje, where in a simulated car accident through a van that was allegedly transporting migrants and a bus, there were a number of casualties where within this exercise each of these institutions had to respond adequately within its responsibility in the quickest and most efficient and best way respond, with the only goal to have as good response as possible to the situation that took place. This drill was very well organized and it was very useful not only for the Ministry of Interior members that secured the event, identified the potential perpetrators of any crimes, witnesses, provided assistance to the casualties and transported them to the health facilities. And it was very beneficial for everybody else and all the other institutions that were on the ground. I would certainly single out to the members of the Red Cross, the Ministry of Health, the ambulance, the paramedics and doctors. This exercise was indeed very beneficial and provided lessons learned where to provide the maximum response in such disasters, and it was indeed very helpful. And what we received as feedback from all the participants in this drill was that we need to have this type of exercises in the future in order to get ready and be ready for any incidents and disasters. Unfortunately, after a few months of this exercise that was simulated, the 16th of March was witnessing this heavy accident. And I indeed deem that this type of tragedy can be responded by any country to a maximum efficiency, and that was a horrendous tragedy that hopefully will never take place again. Both within this tragedy, the very day, the critical day, and the days afterwards, the members of the Ministry of Interior sent more than 3,000 police officers that, in addition to securing the perimeter, inspected the site, provided the criminal investigation on the ground, and they were indeed involved in all the actions taken later on related to saving lives, the total transportation of the injured, especially from hospitals to the border of Macedonia. Irrespective of the border, they were escorted by the police officers, and they extracted the victims. 115 injured persons from this horrible tragedy were transported to foreign health facilities, and police officers were involved heavily in this effort. Also, special forces took part that through their 2 medical vehicles provided their contribution to the transportation. The 2 helicopters were involved of the Ministry of Interior, and all the other police officers that were part of the police, border police, then the authorized police officers from the administrative department were involved by issuing the documents required in the quickest possible fashion, be it identification documents for the injured or their families. And I wish to thank wholeheartedly all police officers and authorized police officers from the Ministry of Interior that were dedicated to a maximum level and most professionally, day in, day out, to provide any assistance in the area of transportation and undertaking all the competencies of the Ministry of Interior related to all the aspects required to respond in this tragedy. May we have never ever this type of disaster and catastrophe where we showed as a country and institutions, especially I will underscore the doctors and nurses and paramedics' contribution. And this has proven that when we are together, we can respond to any type of challenge. Thank you, Mr. Minister. As point from your discussion, I would underscore the plans for emergency response, evacuation, and drills dedicated to that. I'm mentioning this because one of the hospitals, the 8th of September, spoke that hospitals that have plans for emergency reactions and responses can adequately respond to this type of situation. We have with us Ms. Valentina Atanasovska from the Directorate of Rescue and Protection, responsible for the EU Civil Protection Mechanism. So could you tell me what happened and what kind of activities you had to get the EU mechanism involved? Thank you. First of all, let me acquaint the guests what the EU's civil protection mechanism means this is a framework for the collaboration in cases of disasters, and the Republic of North Macedonia, through its Directorate of Rescue and Protection, signed the agreement in 2012, and it was renewed in 2023 with the EU's civil protection mechanism. We have activated this mechanism on a number of occasions starting from 2007, but on the 16th of March we activated at 1501 hours. In accordance with the decision of the government, the request was in 2 stages. We requested aircraft for medical evacuation through medical teams and oxygen support, since all the patients were in this condition, and also hospitalization in specialized hospitals that treat this type of patients with severe burns. The first communication with the coordination center of the response of the emergency response was at 11 o'clock on the 16th of March, when our colleagues called us and offered assistance without our official request, and supplied the document to treat patients with mass burns that was provided to the Ministry of Health. The first offering help was the Republic of Croatia, evacuation and hospitalization of 4 patients at 1,659 hours. On the 17th of March, in the period between 17 and 19 March, the request was updated on a number of occasions. We requested treatment for 15 patients. That was expanded to 57, and as my colleagues pointed out, the number of patients was about 115. I'm just talking about the assistance through the EU emergency mechanism, while regarding the bilateral assistance, the colleagues from the Ministry of Interior will inform you into more detail. The request was opened as per the 24th of March, when it was officially closed. On the 17th of March, there was a brief summary of the entire coordination, transportation of patients to the respective centers. What we could see on the map were the number of patients per countries. Lithuania hospitalized 4 patients in their hospitals, Convinus and Kaunas, and transportation was provided by Romania. 2 patients were hospitalized in Hungary, transported by Luxembourg, Slovenia, Croatia. 2 patients hospitalized in Zagreb, and air transport provided by Luxembourg, Slovenia. 2 patients hospitalized in Maribor, Belgium. 4 patients hospitalized in Brussels, air transport provided by Romania. Hungary, 4 patients transported and hospitalized in Budapest. Poland, Italy, 2 and 4 patients respectively transported and hospitalized in their centers. The 19th of March, Sweden, 2 patients transported and hospitalized. Croatia, additional 3 patients hospitalized in Zagreb. Austria, 6 patients hospitalized in Graz. The very same day, which is a usual practice of the civil protection mechanism, a liaison officer from Brussels was seconded in the period of 20 to the 22nd of March, coordinating the activities of the countries seeking assistance and the countries offering assistance as the Center for Coordination of Disaster Responses. Turkey, 12 patients. Spain, 7 patients hospitalized in Madrid, transported by an aircraft from Norway. The 20th of March, Sweden, 2 patients transported and hospitalized. As you can see, not all the countries avail of aircraft for medical evacuation and the specialized burn treatment centers. However, collaboration and coordination between the countries in terms of securing the timely hospitalization of patients was so quick, and it was rather impressive. Within such short time, we managed to accommodate all severely injured patients in the centers of treatment of this type of injuries. This might be one of the major medical operations in the region, which underscores the possibility of coordination, collaboration, and opportunity to face and handle this extreme situation, because the factor of time is key in this situation. We need to think on our feet, and we need to put all our national capacities at disposal and coordinate the international capacities in terms of transportation and saving lives of our citizens. In terms of internal coordination, the Directorate coordinated with the Ministry of Health. Dr. Igor Merjanovski was the person that I was coordinating directly with for this operation to be implemented. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in terms of consular support for overflows and cross-border crossings. And I wish to underscore the Army aircraft wing, with which we have collaboration in many cases when we have emergencies in the country, because most of the medical aircraft were landing on the military platform, and the entire logistical support was provided by TAF Macedonia for logistical parking of aircraft, land coordination, customs coordination, and all other departments. All international partners confirmed that in spite of all the difficulties faced by our team, our health and national system successfully handled the disaster by providing transportation for our patients in a timely fashion. If there are other questions, please feel free. Did you have any good experiences, and what could you draw as conclusion? Well, some notes that I singled out. It's a fact that in such situations, weaknesses come to the surface, and therefore these disasters have to be used to eliminate the mistakes in the future. So the areas for strengthening would be the development of teams for quick deployment and response to major incidents, capacities to treat patients with severe burns, then legal facilitation of international assistance, and clear definition of roles and responsibilities of relevant institutions. Prior protocols have to be established and exercised with, then the emergency plans should be updated and worked with and implement the single information and communication system, the CSIS mechanism that we as a country are obliged to implement in Chapter 27 of the EU, because this communication will be facilitated and we would avoid this email sending. We would be directly able to see the resources of the states and request what we need. Normally, national capacity has to define its own weaknesses and identify possibilities of overcoming such weaknesses, and a mechanism of lessons learned should be established in order to overcome the weaknesses and not repeat the mistakes. Thank you, Valentina, for your input. Let us primarily see the complexity. When we see transport and transportation, it means 10 logistical procedures that should be undertaken, including, for example, the personal identification documents, since borders are crossed. One of the points I can share is that, for example, we could hear that Croatia applied first in the mechanism, but due to the weather conditions, the helicopter from Zagreb could not arrive in Skopje, which led to some logistical issues in terms of harmonizing the list of patients regarding the transport, country, and hospital to be transported in, which was not minor for coordination. And thank you for the conclusion regarding the emergency plans and regular exercise to reach the required routines for quick responses. I just wish to take this opportunity. I wish to extend my gratitude to the EU delegation and the respected embassies for their selfless support and assistance. We also have the partner Sen Van Rommel coming from the EU Coordination Emergency Response Center. Please play the presentation.
Much for having me on this panel. It's really an honor to represent the ERCC among such distinguished fellow panelists. And well, let me start maybe first also by expressing my deepest sympathies with the victims of these terrible disasters and their families and loved ones of this disaster 1 year ago, but of which I'm sure the impact is still very tangible today. So thank you, Valentina, for outlining perfectly how the Union Civil Protection Mechanism works. I think this slide is a bit a summary of what the mechanism means in practice. So it's a solidarity-based system. When national capacities of a country that is affected by a disaster are overwhelmed, this country can activate a civil protection mechanism and receive coordinated assistance in response. And this assistance can come from the 27 EU member states, but also from 10 participating states that are part of this mechanism, and this includes also North Macedonia. So let me highlight maybe a bit first the role of the Emergency Response Coordination Center within this framework. So the Emergency Response Coordination Center, short ERCC, it's based in Brussels. It's part of the European Commission, and it is key in coordinating these joint European response operations. So whenever a country is faced by disaster and wants to activate the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, the ERCC will receive this request and ideally also a list of needs, and will share this information with the civil protection authorities of the member states and the participating states of the mechanism. And these countries will then receive this request and the list of needs and assess whether or not they are able to offer assistance in response. Once assistance is offered, the ERCC will also support with coordination of the delivery of this assistance to make sure that it happens in a coordinated way, in an efficient way, and as swiftly as possible. It is a 24/7 capacity because, of course, disasters, they can strike at any time, so we have to be able to react fast whenever it is needed. And it does not only cover, here we are specifically speaking about health-related disasters, but it covers different type of disasters. It can be natural disasters, wildfires, flooding, but also war, countries affected by war, or pandemics. So it is a very wide range of disasters that can be covered through the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. But we are today here to look into what the UCPM can do as related to medical evacuations. So the first point is coordination. As mentioned, the ERCC coordinates between the needs of the affected country and what the participating states of the mechanism can offer in response, and tries to make sure that this response is provided in an efficient and swift way. Secondly, the ERCC can also support transport operations, either by identifying transport capacities available by the member states themselves and providing financial support for them, or in case of medical evacuations, the EU, the European Union, also has its own medical evacuation transport capacity available that can be mobilized in case what is provided by the participating states themselves is not sufficient. So this is what we call the rescue reserve capacity. The ERCC, in case of major disasters, can also decide to deploy a Union Civil Protection Team or a ERCC liaison officer, and this team would then be deployed to the affected country to really support the local authorities with the coordination of incoming assistance. And then finally, the ERCC can also deploy expertise. And this is also very relevant in case of health-related disasters, where specific burns expertise can be deployed to the affected country to support the health systems that are likely under high pressure, under very much pressure and may be overwhelmed. So when we look specifically at the Kočani fire disaster, which triggered an activation of the UCPM mechanism, we have prepared here a short timeline which gives a very summarized overview of the activities that were undertaken and which was also already explained by Valentina. So on the 16th of March, the disaster happened, and on the same day the mechanism was activated, formally activated, with a request for assistance from North Macedonia. But even before that, there were already informal contacts with the North Macedonian authorities, with Valentina, because we are part of this network of civil protection authorities, so we could already have an understanding of how is the situation on sites and if there is potential needs, if there is a potential need for European support. And as you can see in the timeline provided, once the mechanism was activated, there was a big expression of European solidarity. And in a matter of days, 40 patients were transported to different countries to receive specialized burn scare treatment. This map gives a bit of the overview of the activities also that took place in the framework of the civil protection mechanism. But there are two important things to highlight here, and as mentioned already, we know that there was also a huge bilateral expression of solidarity, particularly from countries in the region, such as Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Turkey, that also on a bilateral basis received patients. And these bilateral mechanisms were even triggered before the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. So that's why they are not represented specifically in this map, but of course they are a very important part of the picture of European solidarity that was expressed. And secondly, as also mentioned, is that the countries that offered to receive patients for treatment, they did not always have available transport capacities to bring the patients to their own countries. So here the ERCC also helped with identifying suitable transport capacities that could be offered by other countries to bring the patients to the countries where the patients would receive treatments. So in general, I mean, and I also want to express my gratitude to many of you here, or to all of you here, and to everyone who has been involved in this process, because despite the fact that it was a terrible tragedy, this is also a very nice showcase of European solidarity and European cooperation in cases of such, in times of such disasters. And just to highlight that not so long ago, on the 1st of January, Europe was faced with a very similar tragic incident that took place in Switzerland on New Year's Eve, or on the morning of New Year. And also here, Switzerland requested an activation of the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. And also here, there was a huge expression of support from the different participating states of the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, with 40 patients that were very swiftly transported and treated in different European countries. Switzerland also requested additional expertise, so burns assessment teams from 2 countries were also deployed to Switzerland to support with assessment, with prioritization, and with patients, with allocation of patients for medical evacuations. And just to highlight that the ERCC is also following up on, beyond these sudden onset disaster, that the ERCC is also coordinating longer-term medical evacuation operations. For example, for Ukraine, since the full-scale invasion in Ukraine in 2022, almost 5,000 patients have been transported to different European countries to receive treatment. And also, since 2023, 450 patients from Gaza have been transported to European countries to receive medical care. And these operations are both still ongoing. So based on these experiences that the ERCC has over the years in coordinating medevac operations, we know that there are certain essential elements that are decisive to make international medical evacuations successful. And these elements I would like to highlight here. So the first element is capacities. Burn care capacity in Europe particularly is highly specialized but is still limited available, and it's not evenly distributed among European countries. So that means that even with a moderate mass burns casualty incident, the national capacities will very likely be overwhelmed in every European country. Similarly, with transport capacities, they are very specialized and they are not always widely available to be involved in these kind of operations. So that's why international solidarity, whether it be through the Union Civil Protection Mechanism or in a bilaterally, is key in order to fill these response gaps. And from past experiences, including the Kocani fire, we know that this solidarity is really available whenever a country, a European country, is in need of support. However, at the same time, it's also really important to have national capacities in place. Even if there are bilateral agreements in place, even if the Union Civil Protection Mechanism can be activated, until the international assistance arrives in the affected country, it takes time. And particularly in the case of burns care, which is so critical, it is important to have also at the national level a certain surge capacity that can provide this initial care. Secondly, the second pillar is coordination. And with coordination, we mean not only coordination between different countries, which can be supported through the ERCC, but also cross-sectoral coordination. As was already mentioned here, in these type of disasters, different ministries, different sectors have to be involved, ranging from civil protection to health to even defense and foreign affairs. And therefore, it's really of utmost importance to have a strong national level coordination structures in place with clear decision-making processes and having in place also a legal framework that allows for quickly triggering international support if needed. It needs to have sufficient staffing to be able to also respond on a 24/7 basis. And this is particularly relevant in case of mass burns casualty incidents. I do not have a medical background myself, but I had the pleasure to work with many medical experts. And what I know is that in these kind of injuries, the window of opportunity for transporting abroad or for transporting in general is quite limited up to a certain moment of days. So only if the patients are transported immediately or quickly after they have received the injuries. This would be the only window of opportunities to transport them without deteriorating their conditions further. So that's why it is really important to have this coordination framework in place that allows for very quick decision making, particularly when requesting international assistance. In these kind of disasters, we should not be modest. Better to request assistance too early than too late. The third element is expertise. Involving experts throughout the process is really key to allow for evidence-based decision-making process. And particularly when looking at burn treatment, it requires highly specialized medical knowledge, which is usually, again, limited available in European countries because of this high specialty. Therefore, we really also encourage the deployment of specialized teams or requesting for specialized teams when being faced with such a disaster. Burns assessment teams can really support the health capacities in the affected country to relieve actually the pressure on these capacities and to allow for a quick decision making related to prioritization and allocation of medical evacuations. And finally, planning and preparedness. Mass burns incidents, they are chaotic by nature, especially in the first hours. And therefore, it's really key to have predefined emergency plans, clear leaderships, and clear procedures for requesting international assistance in place. Also at the EU level, there is ongoing work on this. Together with the European Burns Associations and the WHO, the European Commission has developed a European plan for mass burns casualty incidents to support preparedness, to support European preparedness in this regard. So the plan really outlines how the UCPM can be involved in international, or can be involved in providing support to burns mass casualty incidents, but it also provides specific guidelines for national authorities, for example, on minimum standards for burns mass casualty plans, preparedness plans. So it is really important that both on the national level and on the international level, we really work to strengthen, work on these elements and to be better prepared for in case the next crisis strikes.
Благодарам. Сиен.
Thank you, Sienna. Thank you for pointing out the importance of preparedness and readiness to respond. Thank you for your intervention that you made first day after the incident happened. And the question was whether we need international assistance or not. Not even Switzerland or other countries can be proud of responding adequately to such incidents, and this proved that our government in the early hours of the incident showed that reacted responsibly. Thank you for expressing solidarity in those moments, and when we were preparing emergency preparedness plans, we decided to ask, instead of 620 seats, that allowed us to immediately organize the medical evacuation of the urgent. And thank you for making the last point. It's difficult to deal with the neighbors, but without having neighbors, it's even harder to deal with certain matters. So we had 10 hours late after this tragedy and 2.5 hours prior to activating the European civil protection mechanisms, and up to the moment of activating the Central European mechanism at 1500 hours, I think that the transports to Ankara, Sofia and Belgrade were either ongoing or they were underway. That proved that the neighbors, after all, have assisted us in the first moments to respond to these needs. However, the tragedy was such that our neighbors had overextended their capacity to respond to such incidents. So in the second wave, we have well received and welcomed the capacities that the European countries have shown to respond to this event. Another issue of tackling this tragedy is engaging also military personnel and sending our injured to military hospitals. Valentina has pointed out the importance and the role of an engagement of the Ministry of Defense. So we have with us the Ministry of Defense, Mr. Vlada Mihajlovski. Honorable Minister, could you please share your perspective on engaging in the emergency response to this incident?
It was most certainly the most difficult day in my life. I think the quick response and reaction by all of us was aimed at saving each and every young life that could be saved. Following the first call, we established this crisis center not only in my office but in the office of the mayor in each command offices. A lot of the activities were run through the Ministry of Defense and the Army. This is the first time that I'm speaking on this topic, and as I have never wanted to underline this, but I would like to use this opportunity and thank the Army and each and every individual service member. Politicians, we are changeable and replaceable, but those in the field have to have all conditions required to save humans' life, or the people in the white coats, that is the physicians and all the other that are involved in this crisis management. But I also see a lot of ambassadors here, and I would like to thank you on behalf of the ministry, my own behalf, and to the attaché as well. I have always been directing my responses. You cannot only turn the mechanism on and find this PowerPoint slide, but since the very moment the head of the ministry and every official and every employee at the institutions, you have to do the best you can so that all the actions are coordinated. You cannot only rely on the mechanism, and we were calling ambassadors, attachés, consuls, both through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we also addressed our NATO allies to ask for additional planes and choppers for a patient to be transported where they needed the most of the flights. Maybe 90% were parts of our operation. You mentioned the wing. It's not only the flights, but all the coordination behind those flights to safely and securely transport patients and to do all the logistics. And also you have to have direct communication on a daily basis with the pilots, and this is why my gratitude goes generally to the Army and to all of those who did their best, and especially those that had to be out in the field all the time, in the ambulances and all army vehicles that were offered by the Army. Instead of being the last institution to get involved in the crisis, we did it shoulder by shoulder with everyone else, and it is also a nice opportunity to remind us that we do need to establish a good system. This system that we saw may be helpful in strategizing our fights such disasters, and we need national resources and a system that for a long time now, whether deliberately or not, was gradually demolished over the years. So we have to go and rebuild it as institutions and demonstrate as a state that we can cope ourselves, but also in coordination with our neighbors. I talked to many ambassadors and many other officials that offer their assistance, but I want you to know that the ministry and the Army are always here to help, although we may not be underlining this every time we do that. We invest maximum efforts to improve as a ministry and as an Army, so that we can provide assistance in all segments of life. Let me wrap this up by thanking each and every ambassador, because what we were doing was, of course, tense, because there was no time to provide help to all the injured, but the very communication with our embassies, NATO members, contributed to us being able to save lives. The pain will, of course, never go away, but the contribution of the institutions and the administration is something that we will cherish and remember. Thank you, Minister, for your input and addressing the elements that we already discussed at the beginning. We were planning to also have a panelist from the medical team that was part of dealing with the tragedy, but since he's an Israeli and the situation in their country is not who he was not able to. But let me also say that we had medical teams arrive in the first 48 hours from Tel Aviv, Israel, from the Czech Republic and Belgrade in Serbia to help in the immediate response to the tragedy. The Belgian team also joined us somewhat later to assess the state of affairs, and then despite that assistance that we received, that was of high importance. What was also important was the fact that these physicians had their own experiences in mass disasters involving burns. Many of them army doctors and personal experience in the conflict zones, and their contribution was significant in that it provided this assurance for our teams that they are doing the right thing. So they help us see how we do it and how we can better cope with the tragedy in Kochani. This event, this tragical event, had many other aspects. One of the less visible in the aspects, just like maybe the army's contributions, was the huge logistics efforts that were behind this operation. We also have this other aspect that I'm not quite sure whether was part of other tragedies, and that is the provision, the actually making sure that the families of the victims are also involved. The government organized this sizable activities, and we made sure that the injured are not transported to other countries alone, but accompanied by their families. And another aspect, also somewhat less visible, that was the return of the 115 injured. Ivica, can we hear, please, your experiences? First of all, let me express my condolences to the families. There are no words that we can use to ease their pain, but there are also actions that can help them overcome this pain. Let me go a step behind. When we gathered at the Prime Minister's office, and he requested us to come up with and delegate actions and activities, and we mentioned the donors' accounts when the government was to stand behind the donors' account of the Red Cross, and I think that was a good step since it is an independent institution, and we were aware that there were people that were willing to help financially and in other ways, and I think that this was a good deed. And the second thing that we did as a state, as we convened this extraordinary government session to set aside the initially 13 million dinners to help the families of the victims at those times, so that they can be right next to their injured members and travel abroad with them to be there for them during their stay abroad. I can say that, just like all of the other institutions, we also had a team of people working 24/7 for several days as patients were transported even in the early hours. So we had to provide the tickets or any means of transportation for the patients and their family members, and accommodate the family members close to the hospitals where these patients were treated. And this is why we opened this phone line. So it was my actually official phone number to be used by all those who have any needs and are affected by this event.
So there were some issues that in the different contexts, and it was not only a matter of saving people. So for 227 people, we have provided hotel accommodation and travel and return tickets to come back. So 98 trips were made from our country to from our medical clinics in Kočani to a certain destination in the neighboring countries or even abroad. Now, what was the process of returning back to the patients to the country, because this was also a logistical operation? Yes, I would like to extend thanks to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of our country, considering that the consulates and the embassies represented the logistical drivers in the field to receive the relatives and the families of the patients, because you're bringing a patient in a foreign country and you do not know when they will be brought back. So it was important that these diplomatic representative offices had to play a role and to give some common sense responses to the families and the relatives and to console them. So the process of bringing the patients over to the foreign medical clinics was the same as returning them back, and that required additional checks with the Ministry of Health, both abroad and our Ministry of Health, that is going to provide an opinion which patient had to remain with having a treatment abroad and those who had to be returned back. There was another incident that took place in Graz in Austria, and then we managed to bring one of our nationals that was treated there to our country. So you're very modest. Thank you for all your effort and this logistical support you provided. Behind these stories, there are hundreds of operations and activities behind the scenes that had to be implemented. And the last but not the least important,
is Igor Merjanovski regarding the health aspect of what has been happening. Dr. Merjanovski, in fact, was the first one to ring the alarm in the health area regarding the accident, and he was on the ground from the very morning of the accident throughout the stages of the health response to what happened. Dr. Merjanovski, what was your experience regarding the admission of the injured and in terms of the communication with the neighboring countries and the EU mechanism, and certainly with the many foreign teams that provided their support here? Thank you. First of all, I would like to extend my deepest condolences to the families. And now I will talk about on behalf of the entire medical staff, and what I'm going to say reflects the words of all paramedics, nurses, and doctors involved in the entire process. The Minister of Interior specified that we had a shared drill where, together with the Ministry of Interior, we set up a crisis headquarters that was activated on the very day. And after the first call, we received about 1521 hours. At 1600, we scheduled a meeting with the Ministry of Interior on the premises of the Ministry of Interior, where very briefly and shortly reported on the information we received. And then the Ministry of Interior took over the security of the truck, the extraction and transportation of the medical assistance, the first aid, and the first patients arrived in our facility at 1600 hours in their private vehicles, and we received this information that it was a major tragedy. And at the very same point, the advisors of health were informed in the government that advised the Prime Minister, that played a key role, and nobody knows about them, Dejan Krombozov and Trajče Mitrev, who were involved from the early morning hours, and even nowadays they are still active with this tragedy. Patients arrived. We mobilized the entire medical staff. We pushed the button of protocols regarding medical staff mobilization, who within 15 to 20 minutes, the mobilization capacity reached 50%, and within an hour we reached 19, even 100% mobilization, which means that the colleagues responded very quickly in the early morning hours, and teams were set up that took over the patients. We had a protocol for teams to examine their status, and they were transported to the departments assessed by the teams, which were anesthesiology teams, intensive care, anesthesiologists, the plastic surgery, and traumatologists, because there were some patients who had fractures. So we set up a rotating teams, and we transported the patients most of all to the intensive care units, where we received feedback that some of the patients had their status deteriorating, and that we lacked the capacity to take care of them and provide them with adequate medical assistance. At that point, we communicated with the Minister of Defense, Vlada Mihailovsky, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, where we jointly decided that assistance shall be requested from the neighboring countries by bilateral calls. The first patients were transported to Serbia, Greece, and Bulgaria, which in the first wave of patients managed to vacate some of the beds in the anesthesiology and intensive care units to treat the other patients. And we communicated with the Kočani and Štip hospitals, and Kočani hospital was transferring its patients to Štip hospital. We received information that the patients were okay. However, the first patients arriving in our facility were in good condition, but as the time was passing by, the injury that they had by inhaling smoke and their airways were distracted, and we received from the Kočani and Štip hospitals a request that all the patients shall be transferred to the Skopje hospital, and we set up a path for transportation, because not any healthcare system can respond to this type of tragedy with this size of burns. And we actually reacted from experience. We had a number of tragedies that ended up very badly, and from the drill with the Ministry of Interior, we established the liaisons with the ambulance, the Ministry of Interior, other institutions, all hospitals were involved. So we already had some connections established, and it was much easier for us to refer our patients properly for treatment. About 14, I think that we had discussions with Valentina before the EU got involved with its civil protection mechanism, where Valentina guided us that it should be alarmed as quickly as possible in consultation with the Prime Minister's advisors on health. We were instructed to alarm the mechanism, and that's how the transport of patients started. The patients that had the need for medical care, and we were not able to provide such medical care to them. So the entire evacuation process started. What was the issue we faced? The issue we faced on the outset, because this system was not familiar to us. Now we are familiarized with it, and there's going to be working groups throughout this year, and we will further learn about the aspects that are important not to avoid standstills in the entire operation. They request a protocol for each patient. The history shall be there, the diagnosis, and the testing and examinations. Name and surname, passport number, and these documents shall be sent through the system through a loop network in the EU, and the hospitals that can accept such patient with such diagnosis shall accept this patient by pushing a button. So what was happening to us throughout the process, some other patients got involved. When some of these patients were taken to the airport, we were trying to fill the vacancy by another patient that had a higher need for transportation, and the system refused these patients. The Minister of Foreign Affairs played a great role there, Minister Vlada, who had direct communication with the ambassadors, and under some kind of pressure, I think that they were under great pressure, we managed for those patients that had severe symptoms deteriorating in the course of time to be put for treatment, and I think that we managed somehow to handle the situation. We didn't lose any human life during the transport phase, which was the case with the previous tragedies, and the healthcare system showed that it could respond to the challenge of this size and this type of tragedy. Thank you, Dr. Merjanovski. This is just some small part of those testimonies that in such an emergency we had to think about passports and passport numbers and take care of similar administrative and logistic issues. I think that we have all contributed to documenting what was happening, and a good outcome of this conference would be for some of these experiences to be documented on how we handle the situation. That could be a good basis for our future plans and preparations to be made. Now I would summarize some of the conclusions.
First of all, the tragedy in Kočani, according to the number of casualties, is the second biggest tragedy in modern Macedonia after the disastrous earthquake in 1964, and according to the number of casualties, is the second. According to the size of the event, is the fourth. And the institutions, the healthcare institutions, were faced with a challenge that they may face every 100 years, that during this process good decisions were made, and this was a reminder that not any national civil response system can respond adequately, and neither Switzerland, as we have mentioned, nor other European countries that have more solid healthcare system is in place cannot handle such an incident of this size. Both healthcare institutions from Kočani and in the capital, in Skopje, have responded on timely basis, and that the first transportations took place only 10 hours after the tragedy. And the first assistance arrived from the neighboring countries, and we are grateful to them. But however, they have also exceeded their response capacities, and the early response, European early response system also was activated on time. We have demonstrated an exceptional coordination both on international and a national level. It's rare to see in a person's lifetime that such coordination took place, and I would like to emphasize that. And over 200 injuries that were admitted in Macedonian hospitals, and 115 injured that were admitted in European hospitals were proof that we managed to save the life of those that were in jeopardy. We worked on saving each life, and out of this session we may conclude that the Macedonian institutions and the Macedonian healthcare system managed to handle this situation to the best of their abilities regarding the tragedy in Kočani. I would like to close this panel now. The further panels will be not related to the institutional response capacities, but rather to the healthcare effects, and these experiences can help us in the planning of, God forbid, any other future tragedy.